6 months. That's how long the basketball world held its breath. 6 months of uncertainty. 6 months of whispers. 6 months of wondering if we'd ever see that Caitlin Clark again. And then she walked into Duke University's training facility for Team USA camp. And within the first hour, jaws hit the floor. But here's the thing nobody expected. It wasn't just that Caitlin Clark was back. It wasn't just that she looked healthy. It was something far more significant than that. The entire Team USA coaching staff had to throw out their playbook. Not because Clark couldn't keep up with their system. No, because their system couldn't keep up with her. Let that sink in for a second. We're talking about the most dominant international basketball program in history. A program built on decades of championship DNA. A program that's produced legends from Lisa Leslie to Diana Taurasi to Sue Bird. And they're rebuilding it around a 23-year-old who just spent half a year on the sidelines. That's not normal. That's not how this works. That's not how any of this is supposed to work. But Caitlin Clark has never done anything the normal way, has she? Before we get into what happened at that camp, before we reveal the moment that made Sue Bird's eyes go wide, you need to understand just how bad things had gotten. Rewind to 2025. The Fever were supposed to build on Clark's record-breaking rookie campaign. 62 records. Rookie of the Year. The most hyped player in WNBA history. Everything was set up for domination. Then disaster struck. It started with a quad strain during preseason. No big deal, right? Players work through those all the time. She pushed forward. Then another quad injury hit early in the season. 3 weeks gone. The first real warning sign. But Clark is tough. Everyone knows that. She came back. She fought through it. And then came July. The groin strain. If you've never dealt with a groin injury, you don't understand. It's not like a rolled ankle. It's not like a sore shoulder. A groin injury messes with everything. Your lateral movement? Compromised. Your ability to change direction? Gone. That explosive first step that made Caitlin Clark impossible to guard? A question mark. She tried to play through it. Because that's what competitors do. But her body had other plans. The injury kept getting worse. The pain wasn't going away. And then, as if the basketball gods were testing her resolve, an ankle bone bruise followed. Season over. Just like that. The player who had electrified the sports world, the woman who had single-handedly transformed the WNBA's popularity, was sitting at home watching games instead of playing in them. And the question started. Would she ever move the same way? Would that step-back three still be there? Could she handle the physicality of international basketball? Was this the beginning of the end before things even really began? Medical experts were skeptical. Groin injuries change players. They alter how you plant your foot. They affect how you cut. They create compensation patterns that lead to more injuries down the road. Some careers never recover from what Caitlin went through. And then there was the mental side. 6 months without 5-on-5 basketball. 6 months of watching your teammates struggle without you. 6 months of rehab sessions instead of game-winning shots. That kind of isolation does something to a player's confidence. But here's where the story takes a turn that nobody, and I mean nobody, saw coming. When Caitlin Clark walked into that Team USA training camp in December, she didn't walk in cautiously. She didn't walk in tentatively, testing her body, protecting herself from contact. She walked in like she owned the place. The warm-ups told the first part of the story. Her movement looked fluid, natural. There was no hesitation, no compensation, no favoring of either leg. The coaches were watching every step, every cut, every pivot, looking for weaknesses, finding none. But warm-ups are deceiving. Everyone knows that. The real test would come when the pace picked up, when bodies started flying, when the game got physical. And that's when Sue Bird noticed something that made her stop mid-conversation. Caitlin stepped back into a transition three from 30 feet out. The timing was automatic. The balance was perfect. The ball went through the net like it had never stopped. Bird turned to the person next to her and said something that would set the tone for everything that followed. But what she said and what happened next would change how everyone viewed Caitlin Clark's future with Team USA. The veterans were about to learn a very uncomfortable lesson. Here's what Sue Bird understood that most people watching didn't. That step-back three wasn't just a shot. It wasn't just proof that Caitlin Clark's body was healthy. It was a statement about something much deeper. The rhythm was back. And if you know anything about elite basketball, you know that rhythm is everything. You can have all the physical tools in the world. You can be faster, stronger, more athletic than everyone on the court. But without rhythm, you're just another player. Caitlin Clark's rhythm is what separates her from everyone else. It's the timing between her dribble and her release. It's the split-second decision-making that turns a good pass into an impossible one. It's the internal clock that tells her exactly when to pull up from logo range. 6 months should have destroyed that rhythm. It didn't. But here's where things got really interesting. The scrimmages started. Real 5-on-5 action. Bodies colliding. Defenders closing out hard. The kind of intensity that exposes any lingering weakness, any hidden limitation, any player who's not ready for this level. And something weird happened. Veterans who had been playing together for years, players who had won Olympic gold medals, who had dominated on the international stage, suddenly looked confused. It started with Dearica Hamby. Clark threaded a pass into the post that was absolutely perfect. The timing, the angle, the velocity, everything about that pass was designed for one thing: a quick catch and immediate finish. Hamby caught it. And then she brought the ball down. In basketball, that's a cardinal sin. When someone delivers a pass like that, you keep it high. You finish immediately. You don't give the defense time to recover. But Hamby hesitated. She wasn't expecting the ball to arrive that fast. She wasn't expecting the passing window that Clark had created. And the play fell apart. Now Dearica Hamby is a fantastic player. She's been to multiple All-Star games. She knows what she's doing on a basketball court. But she wasn't ready for Caitlin Clark. And she wasn't the only one. Other veterans were having the same problem. They were cutting when they should have already been at their spots. They were pausing when they should have been moving. They were processing the play while Clark had already moved 3 steps ahead mentally. One observer at the camp put it perfectly: "You can't do that. You have to keep it up." She's seeing things before they happen. This is the part that everyone needs to understand about Caitlin Clark. She doesn't play basketball at the same speed as everyone else. It's not that she's physically faster, though she's plenty quick. It's that her mind operates on a different level. She sees the play developing before it develops. She throws the pass to where you're going to be, not where you are. And if you're not ready for that, you're going to look slow. You're going to look unprepared. You're going to bring the ball down when you should be finishing. The coaching staff started taking notes. This wasn't just a Hamby problem. This was a systemic issue. The entire Team USA roster was operating at one speed, and Caitlin Clark was operating at another. Now, here's where most coaching staffs would make a critical mistake. The easy solution? Tell Clark to slow down. Ask her to simplify her game. Make her wait for teammates to get into position before making those highlight reel passes. Dumb down the best passer in basketball history to fit a system built for lesser players. That's what most teams would do. But head coach Kara Lawson isn't most coaches. She watched those scrimmages. She saw the timing issues. She saw veterans struggling to keep up with a 23-year-old who hadn't played in 6 months. And she made a decision that would reshape the entire Team USA program. Instead of slowing Clark down, she was going to speed everyone else up. Think about that for a second. Team USA, the most successful international basketball program ever assembled, was going to rebuild their entire offensive system around one player. Not a veteran with years of international experience. Not an established star who had already proven herself on the Olympic stage. A second-year player coming off a devastating injury season. The practices shifted immediately. Coaches started drilling the other players on Clark's timing. They taught them to anticipate passes that seemed impossible. They worked on reading her eyes, understanding her tendencies, moving at her speed. The floor spacing changed. With Clark's logo range three-pointer, defenses had to extend further than ever before. That created passing lanes that had never existed in Team USA's offense. New opportunities, new angles, new ways to attack. Sets were being redesigned in real time. Plays that had worked for years were being scrapped because they didn't maximize what Clark brought to the table. This wasn't about fitting Caitlin Clark into Team USA's system anymore. This was about building Team USA's system around Caitlin Clark. But there was one player who didn't need any adjustment period. One player who caught every pass cleanly. Who finished through contact like she'd run these plays 1,000 times. Who read Clark's mind before she even released the ball. And when the coaching staff saw what these two could do together, they realized they weren't just watching good chemistry. They were watching the future of American basketball. Aaliyah Boston didn't need a tutorial. While veterans were fumbling passes and adjusting to Caitlin Clark's speed, Boston was operating like she had a direct line into Clark's brain. And honestly, she kind of did. See, here's what everyone watching that Team USA camp needed to remember. Clark and Boston had already spent an entire WNBA season learning each other's games. They'd been through the grind together. The wins, the losses, the late-game situations where everything was on the line. That kind of experience creates something that can't be taught. Chemistry. Real chemistry. Not the kind coaches try to manufacture in practice. Not the kind that looks good in warm-ups but falls apart under pressure. The kind that makes two players move as one unit. During the scrimmages, it was almost unfair. Clark would come off a screen and Boston would already be rolling to the rim. Not a second late. Not a step behind. Perfectly in sync. The timing was automatic. Clark would drive into the lane, draw two defenders, and whip a pass to a spot that looked completely empty. But Boston was already on her way there. She'd catch it in stride and finish through contact before the defense could recover. Over and over and over again. Other players were watching this happen with a mix of admiration and frustration. How were they so locked in? How did Boston always know where Clark was going with the ball? The answer was simple. 100 practices, 100 games, 100 moments of learning each other's tendencies. But here's what made this partnership truly dangerous. It wasn't just about their connection. It was about what their connection did to defenses. Think about the impossible situation they created. You've got Caitlin Clark at the top of the key. She can pull up from logo range 30 feet from the basket and knock it down like it's a layup. So you can't sag off her. You have to respect that shot from the moment she crosses half court. But if you press up on her too tight, she'll blow by you. That first step is back. The lateral quickness is there. She'll get into the paint before you can blink. So now you need help defense. Someone has to rotate over to cut off her drive. But wait, Boston is rolling to the rim. Now you've got a choice. Stop Clark's drive and leave Boston wide open for an easy finish. Or stay home on Boston and watch Clark carve up your defense with either a floater, a kick out, or a finish at the rim. There's no good answer. Every option leaves you exposed. The coaching staff was grinning watching this unfold. They'd seen dominant duos before. They'd built teams around star pairings in the past. But this was different. This wasn't just two good players who complemented each other. This was a system-breaking combination. International teams aren't built to handle this kind of inside-outside attack. They're used to American teams relying on size and athleticism. They're used to half-court sets and methodical offense. They're not used to a point guard who can shoot from another zip code and a center who moves like Boston does. And here's the part that had everyone buzzing. Clark wasn't just making Boston better. Boston was making Clark better too. When Clark knew Boston was on the court, her decision-making got even sharper. She took more risks with her passes because she trusted Boston to be where she needed to be. She attacked the paint more aggressively because she knew Boston would clean up any miss. Their partnership unlocked new levels in both players. One play in particular had the whole gym talking. Clark had the ball at the top of the key. Two defenders collapsed on her immediately, because that's what you do with Caitlin Clark. You can't give her any space. You can't let her get comfortable. But that double team created exactly what Clark wanted. She whipped a pass, a bullet really, into the post where Boston was sealing her defender. The pass threaded through two players and arrived at the perfect spot, at the perfect time, at the perfect height for Boston to catch and finish in one motion. Nobody else on that court could have made that pass. Nobody else on that court could have caught it that cleanly. It was a play that only works when two players are operating on the same wavelength. And the implications were massive. Because here's what the coaching staff was really thinking about. This connection wasn't just valuable for the 2026 World Cup qualifiers. This was the foundation for something much bigger. Los Angeles 2028. The Olympic Games. On home soil. The biggest stage in sports. And the two players who looked most ready to dominate on that stage? They both wore Indiana Fever jerseys. But there was another factor that made this situation even more unique. Someone on the Team USA coaching staff knew exactly how to maximize this partnership. Someone who had already spent a year figuring out how Clark and Boston fit together. And she wasn't just there to observe. Stephanie White was sitting courtside with a look that said everything. The Indiana Fever head coach wasn't at Team USA camp by accident. She was there as an assistant coach for the national team. And while other coaches were still figuring out how to use Caitlin Clark effectively, White already had the blueprint. She'd spent an entire season building it. Think about the advantage that created. Most Team USA coaches were meeting Clark for the first time. They were watching her in scrimmages, taking notes, trying to understand her tendencies. What triggers her best passes? When does she pull up from deep? How does she read defenses? Stephanie White already knew all of that. She knew that Clark operates best with space to create. She knew that Boston needed specific positioning to maximize their connection. She knew the subtle adjustments that turned good possessions into great ones. And she was feeding that information directly into Team USA's system. Head coach Kara Lawson spoke about Clark after the first day of practice. Her words were revealing. "This is the first time I've coached Caitlin or spent any time with her," Lawson admitted. "She's a terrific player. Really locked in and focused." But then Lawson said something that showed she understood what was happening at a deeper level. "The conversation I had with her pre-practice was that this is going to be one of the most fun experiences she's had. Because everyone at this level loves the game like a lot." Lawson paused. "When you're growing up in high school, not every player loves the game like you love it. Then you go to college and not every player loves the game like you love it. I'm talking about the elite skill, the elite competitors." Then came the key line. "Then you get here and you're like, whoa, there's more people like me. And it's just fantastic." That quote reveals something important about what was happening at this camp. Clark wasn't just proving she could compete at the international level. She was finding her people. Elite competitors who matched her intensity. Players who lived and breathed basketball the same way she did. And that environment was bringing out something new in her game. See, during her time at Iowa and her rookie year with the Fever, Clark was often the hardest worker in the room by a significant margin. She set the standard. She pushed the pace. She demanded excellence from teammates who sometimes couldn't keep up. But at Team USA camp, everyone was operating at her level. The intensity during scrimmages was relentless. No plays off. No coasting through possessions. Every single player was competing like it was Game 7 of the finals. And Clark was thriving in that environment. Her competitive fire, that edge that makes her special, finally had worthy opponents to sharpen itself against. She was going up against the best defenders in the world every single day. Players who could actually stay in front of her. Players who could contest her shots. Players who forced her to be great instead of just good. That kind of competition elevates everyone. But for someone like Clark who feeds off challenges, it was rocket fuel. The improvement was visible from day 1 to day 2. Her timing got sharper. Her reads got faster. Her communication with teammates got clearer. But here's what nobody expected. Clark wasn't just getting better individually. She was making everyone around her better too. Young players at the camp were watching how she approached every drill. The intensity she brought to warm-ups. The focus during film sessions. The way she demanded perfection from herself on every single play. That standard became contagious. Paige Buchers, the UConn star who had been dealing with her own injury challenges, was feeding off Clark's energy. Their backcourt combination during scrimmages was creating all kinds of problems for defenders. Two players with elite court vision. Two players who could shoot from anywhere. Two players who saw the game 3 steps ahead. The passing between them was almost telepathic. Angel Reese was there too, bringing her own intensity to the camp. The LSU star and Clark had history. Their rivalry in college basketball had captivated the nation. But at Team USA camp, they weren't rivals. They were teammates working toward the same goal. And Reese understood exactly what was happening. "Everybody wants to make the team," Reese said during camp. "They didn't just select us for no reason. They handpicked us because they thought we would bring something to the table." That mindset was exactly what Coach Lawson needed. Every player understood their role. Every player knew they'd been chosen for specific skills and specific contributions. There was no confusion about expectations. But there was one question that still lingered over everything. Could Caitlin Clark handle the physicality? College basketball is physical. The WNBA is more physical. But international basketball, FIBA rules, operates on a completely different level. Contact that would be a foul in the States? Legal overseas. The pace is faster. The bodies are bigger. The refs swallow their whistles. And for a player coming off a groin injury and an ankle bone bruise, that physicality represented the ultimate test. The coaching staff needed to know if Clark could take the punishment and keep performing. They needed to see her absorb contact and finish plays. They needed proof that her body could handle what was coming. So they set up a very specific situation. Scout team players from small colleges across North Carolina were brought in to simulate FIBA-level physicality. These players were given one instruction: play her as hard as you possibly can. What happened next would answer every remaining question about Caitlin Clark's readiness. The scout team players didn't hold back. They couldn't. Their instructions were clear: simulate FIBA-level physicality. Make Caitlin Clark earn every single inch on that court. Hit her on drives. Contest every shot. Body her on screens. No mercy. These weren't nobodies either. College players hungry to prove themselves against the best in the world. Kids who would go home and tell their teammates they went toe-to-toe with Caitlin Clark at Team USA camp. They had every reason to bring maximum intensity. And they did. Clark came off a ball screen and immediately caught a forearm to the chest. The kind of contact that would stop most players in their tracks. The kind of hit that makes you think twice about driving the lane again. Clark didn't even flinch. She absorbed the contact, adjusted her angle, and finished with her left hand. Then she got back on defense like nothing happened. The coaches looked at each other. A few possessions later, a scout team defender decided to test Clark's ankle. Not dirty, just aggressive. Tight closeouts. Hard plants. The kind of pressure that would expose any lingering instability. Clark pulled up from 25 feet and drilled it in his face. Next possession, she drove baseline against a physical big. Took a hip check that would have knocked smaller guards off their path. Instead, Clark used the contact to create space and floated one off the glass. And possession after possession, the scout team threw everything they had at her. And possession after possession, Clark answered. The lateral movement was there. The explosion to the rim was there. The ability to absorb punishment and keep executing was there. 6 months of inactivity had done nothing to diminish her toughness. But here's what surprised everyone watching. It wasn't just that Clark could handle the physicality. It was that she seemed to welcome it. Every hard foul fueled her. Every aggressive closeout sharpened her focus. The more physical things got, the more locked in she became. One observer at the camp noted, she was just so happy to be there. Even when scout team players were instructed to play at FIBA-level physicality, she looked good. She was thriving. This was the real test. Not the skills, everyone knew she had those. Not the shooting, everyone knew that was elite. Not even the passing, which remained as supernatural as ever. The question was whether her body could survive what international basketball demanded. The answer was emphatic. When reporters asked Clark directly about her health status, she didn't hedge. She didn't qualify. She didn't give some careful PR-approved response. 100%, she said. I'm at 100%. Bold words from someone who had spent half a year on the sideline. Bold words from someone whose season had been destroyed by injury after injury after injury. But her performance backed up every syllable. Coach Lawson was impressed, but measured in her public comments. Here's a player that didn't get to play this summer, Lawson said. Aaliyah didn't get to play a lot of basketball really in the last year plus. So for this to be the first day back, she looked great. Then Lawson addressed the one thing that still needed work. The things that are going to be hard is always the conditioning part. It's really hard to get in basketball shape without playing basketball. So I'm sure that's going to come as the camp comes. Fair point. Conditioning takes time. Game shape is different from workout shape. But then Lawson added something that revealed her true feelings. And the other thing is rhythm, right? You got to find your rhythm. And I'm sure everybody saw that one step back in transition she had. So, the rhythm looks great. There it was. The rhythm looked great. That was the whole ball game. That was everything. If the rhythm was there, everything else would follow. And the rhythm was definitely there. But here's what the physical dominance really meant in the bigger picture. Clark's health confirmation opened doors that had been completely closed during her injury-plagued season. Suddenly, coaches weren't just evaluating whether she could contribute to Team USA. They were evaluating how much responsibility she could handle. The starting point guard role, the position that controls everything in international basketball, became a real possibility. Not a distant hope. Not a maybe someday conversation. A right now reality. Think about what that means. Team USA was considering handing the keys to their entire offense to a second-year player. A player with zero international experience. A player who had just missed 6 months of competitive basketball. That doesn't happen unless you're special. That doesn't happen unless you're transcendent. That doesn't happen unless you're Caitlin Clark. The coaching staff started building systems around her unique skill set. Not working around her limitations, because there weren't any limitations left to work around. Building around her strengths. Her passing ability dictated how the team spaced the floor. Her shooting range determined how they ran their sets. Her decision-making speed set the tempo for everyone else. But this wasn't just about the 2026 World Cup qualifiers anymore. The implications stretched much further than a tournament in Germany. Coach Lawson was looking at something that could reshape the entire future of American basketball. And she was about to make a decision that would send shockwaves through the sports world. Kara Lawson stood at the edge of the court, watching the final scrimmage of camp unfold. But she wasn't just watching what was happening in front of her. She was seeing 4 years into the future. Los Angeles. 2028. The Olympic Games on American soil. The biggest stage in sports. The entire world watching. And she was already building the team that would dominate it. See, that's what most people didn't understand about this Team USA camp. Yes, it was about the 2026 World Cup qualifiers in Germany. Yes, it was about evaluating talent for the immediate future. But the real purpose? The long game? This was an audition for Olympic glory. And Caitlin Clark wasn't just passing the audition. She was rewriting the script entirely. Lawson had coached at the highest levels. She'd seen generational talents come through USA basketball programs. She knew what championship DNA looked like. This was different. What she was witnessing at Duke's training facility wasn't just a talented player returning from injury. It was the emergence of something that could define American basketball for the next decade. Clark's court vision. Boston's finishing ability. The young core of players adapting to a new style of play. It was all clicking into place. But here's what made Lawson's situation so complicated. Team USA had always relied on a specific formula. Size. Athleticism. Overwhelming physical dominance. The approach was simple. Put the best individual talents on the court and let them figure it out. That formula had worked for decades. Gold medal after gold medal. Dominant victory after dominant victory. The United States had become synonymous with basketball excellence. But the rest of the world was catching up. International teams had gotten smarter. More skilled. Better coached. The gap was closing every single Olympic cycle. Spain. France. Australia. China. These weren't pushovers anymore. They ran sophisticated offensive systems. They exploited weaknesses. They competed for 40 full minutes. The old approach, relying purely on talent, was becoming increasingly risky. Lawson knew that Team USA needed to evolve. And Caitlin Clark represented that evolution. Her style of play was different from anything the national team had featured before. The pace. the creativity, the willingness to take risks that other players wouldn't even consider. She didn't play the safe, methodical basketball that had defined previous Team USA squads. She played fast. She played fearless. She played like someone who believed she could make any pass, hit any shot, break any defense. That confidence was infectious. During the camp scrimmages, Lawson noticed something remarkable happening. Younger players were matching Clark's intensity. They were pushing themselves harder. They were attempting passes they never would have tried before. The entire energy of the team was shifting. Veterans were adapting too, some more willingly than others. But even the ones who struggled initially with Clark's pace were starting to figure it out. They were learning to move differently. Think faster. Trust that the ball would find them in unexpected places. The transformation was happening in real time. But Lawson faced a critical decision. How much responsibility should she give Clark for the 2026 qualifiers? The safe play would be to ease her in. Let veterans control the offense. Give Clark minutes off the bench to get acclimated to international basketball. That's what conventional wisdom suggested. That's what previous coaches would have done. But Lawson didn't become a head coach by following conventional wisdom. She saw something in Clark that demanded a different approach. The court vision. The leadership. The way other players responded to her energy. This wasn't a player who needed to be eased into anything. This was a player who needed the ball in her hands with the game on the line. And so Lawson made her decision. Caitlin Clark would be the starting point guard for the 2026 World Cup qualifiers. Not a backup learning the ropes. Not a role player contributing off the bench. The starting point guard. The player who would control Team USA's offense against the best competition in the world. It was a statement. It was a gamble. It was exactly what Clark had earned. But the decision had implications that stretched far beyond one tournament. Because by handing Clark the keys to the offense, Lawson was also establishing the foundation for Los Angeles 2028. She was signaling to everyone, players, coaches, the entire basketball world, that this young core was the future. Clark, Boston, Buchers, Reese. The names that would define American basketball for the next Olympic cycle. And they were just getting started. But there was one more element that made this moment truly significant. One more factor that elevated this camp from important to historic. It wasn't just about Team USA building something new. It was about what this meant for the Indiana Fever. The connection was impossible to ignore. Indiana Fever fingerprints were all over this Team USA camp. And the implications for the franchise were absolutely massive. Think about what was happening. The national team's starting point guard? A Fever player. The center with the best chemistry with that point guard? A Fever player. The assistant coach who knew exactly how to maximize both of them? The Fever's head coach. This wasn't coincidence. This was validation. For years, the Fever had been rebuilding, struggling, trying to find their identity in a league that had passed them by. The franchise that had once featured Tamika Catchings and dominated the WNBA had fallen into irrelevance. And then Caitlin Clark arrived. Suddenly, Indiana wasn't just relevant again. They were the center of the basketball universe. Every game was must-see TV. Every highlight went viral. The attention was unprecedented. But attention doesn't equal respect. Some critics dismissed the Fever's success as a Caitlin Clark phenomenon. A one-woman show that would collapse the moment she faced adversity. They pointed to the injury-plagued 2025 season as evidence that the foundation was shaky. This Team USA camp changed that narrative entirely. Because it wasn't just Clark who impressed. It was the entire Fever ecosystem. Boston proved she belonged on the international stage. Her ability to finish in traffic, her chemistry with Clark, her defensive versatility, all of it translated perfectly to this level. Stephanie White proved her coaching acumen extended beyond the WNBA. Her insights into Clark and Boston's partnership were invaluable to the national team staff. Her voice carried weight in a room full of elite basketball minds. The Fever weren't just producing individual talent. They were producing a culture. A style of play that was now influencing how Team USA approached the game. A system that prioritized pace, creativity, and unselfish basketball. A philosophy that was reshaping American basketball at the highest level. That's not something you can buy. That's not something you can manufacture overnight. That's the result of building something real. And here's where it gets really interesting for Fever fans. Everything Clark and Boston learned at Team USA camp would come back with them to Indiana. The experience of competing against the best players in the world every single day. The adjustments they made to handle international physicality. The timing they refined while playing at maximum intensity. All of that development would benefit the Fever. They weren't just representing their country. They were investing in their franchise's future. But the benefits went even deeper than individual improvement. Clark and Boston were building chemistry at the national team level that would translate directly to their WNBA partnership. The connection that was already elite was getting even sharper. They were learning new ways to read each other, new combinations that opponents hadn't seen yet. When they returned to Indiana, they wouldn't be starting from scratch. They'd be picking up where they left off, but better. And then there was the confidence factor. Clark had just proven, to herself, to her coaches, to the entire basketball world, that she was fully healthy. That the injuries hadn't diminished her abilities. That she was still the most dynamic player in the sport. That kind of confirmation does something to an athlete's psyche. All the doubts that had crept in during those 6 months of rehab? Gone. All the questions about whether she could still perform at the highest level? Answered. Clark would return to the Fever with a chip on her shoulder and proof that she was back. That combination is terrifying for opposing teams. Boston would return with validation that her game translated internationally. That she wasn't just a product of playing alongside Clark, she was a legitimate star in her own right. Stephanie White would return with insights from the best basketball minds in the country. New plays. New concepts. New ways to maximize her roster's talents. The Fever were about to level up in ways that nobody could fully anticipate. But here's the thing that should really excite Indiana fans. This was just the beginning. The 2026 World Cup qualifiers would give Clark and Boston their first taste of international competition together. It would be a proving ground for everything they'd worked on at camp. And if they dominated there, Los Angeles 2028 would be waiting. The Olympics, on home soil, with the Fever's core players leading Team USA on the biggest stage in sports. That's not a pipe dream anymore. That's a realistic path that was being paved right here, right now, at this Duke University training facility. But before anyone could get too far ahead of themselves, there was something happening at camp that demanded immediate attention. Something that revealed just how much this young generation was changing the game. And it had everything to do with how Clark approached leadership. Leadership isn't about talking the loudest. Caitlin Clark understood that better than most players twice her age. During Team USA camp, something fascinating was happening that had nothing to do with statistics or highlight plays. It was subtle. Easy to miss if you weren't paying close attention. But the coaches noticed. Clark was leading without demanding the spotlight. She was setting standards without giving speeches. She was elevating everyone around her simply by being herself. And that's the rarest kind of leadership there is. Watch most young superstars in team environments. They demand the ball. They want every possession to run through them. They measure success by their own numbers, their own moments, their own glory. Clark was doing the opposite. When a teammate made a great cut, she found them with a pass that made them look like all-stars. When someone hit a shot off her assist, she celebrated like she'd scored herself. When younger players made mistakes, she offered quiet encouragement instead of visible frustration. The veterans took notice. Here was a 23-year-old with more hype than anyone in women's basketball history. A player who could easily have walked into camp with an ego that demanded constant validation. Instead, she walked in with a work ethic that challenged everyone to match her intensity. The morning sessions told the story. Clark was always among the first players in the gym. Getting extra shots up. Working on conditioning. Studying film from previous international competitions. Doing the invisible work that separates good players from great ones. Other young players saw this and adjusted their own routines. Paige Buchers started arriving earlier. Angel Reese extended her practice sessions. The rising generation was watching Clark's habits and adopting them as their own. That's leadership that compounds over time. But here's what really set Clark apart in this environment. She embraced her role as the connector. During scrimmages, she made a conscious effort to involve every single player on her team. Not just Boston, whose chemistry with her was already established. Not just the stars who would obviously contribute. Everyone. Role players who might only see limited minutes in actual competition? Clark found them with passes that showcased their skills. Young players still figuring out their place on the roster? Clark created opportunities for them to shine. It was intentional, calculated, and incredibly effective. Because when you're the starting point guard for Team USA, your job isn't just to score. It isn't just to create highlights for yourself. Your job is to make 12 players feel like they belong on the same court as you. Your job is to build a team that's greater than the sum of its parts. Clark was doing exactly that. Coach Lawson pulled her aside after one particularly impressive scrimmage session. The conversation was private, but the message was clear. Keep doing what you're doing. The way Clark was integrating with this roster was accelerating the team-building process by months. Connections that usually take entire tournament cycles to develop were forming in days. And it wasn't just on the court. Off the court, Clark was equally engaged, participating in team activities, building relationships with players she'd only competed against before, breaking down barriers between different WNBA franchises. Angel Reese talked about it openly. The rivalry that had captivated college basketball? The back and forth that had generated more attention than almost any matchup in the sport's history? It was evolving into mutual respect. We're teammates now, Reese said. It's not about that other stuff anymore. We're here to represent our country. That mindset didn't happen by accident. It happened because players like Clark set a tone that prioritized team over individual. But there was something else happening that revealed the full scope of Clark's evolution. She was learning from the veterans too. Players like Sue Bird had walked these exact halls, had faced these exact pressures, had represented Team USA on the biggest stages in the world. Clark was absorbing their wisdom like a sponge. How do you handle the pressure of international competition? How do you manage your body through grueling tournament schedules? How do you maintain peak performance when the entire world is watching? These weren't questions Clark had needed to answer before, but she would need to answer them soon. The 2026 World Cup qualifiers were approaching. Real games. Real consequences. The first test of everything this camp had built. And the expectations couldn't have been higher. But as Clark prepared for that challenge, another question was emerging. One that would define not just her career, but the entire future of women's basketball. Was the world ready for what Caitlin Clark was about to unleash on the international stage? Leadership isn't given. It's taken. And Caitlin Clark was taking it in ways that nobody expected. See, here's the thing about Team USA camps. They have a hierarchy. Unwritten rules about who speaks and who listens. Veterans who have paid their dues get the respect. Young players are supposed to stay quiet, work hard, and earn their place over time. That's how it's always worked. Clark didn't get that memo. From the first practice she was vocal, communicating on defense, directing traffic on offense, calling out rotations and adjustments like she'd been doing this for years. Some veterans raised eyebrows at first. Who was this second-year player commanding the court like she owned it? Who gave her permission to lead a team full of accomplished professionals? Nobody did. She gave herself permission. And here's what made it work. Clark backed up every word with action. When she called for a specific cut, she delivered the pass perfectly. When she demanded defensive intensity, she was the first one diving for loose balls. When she pushed the pace in scrimmages, she was still sprinting in the fourth quarter while others were gassed. Her leadership wasn't about ego. It was about standards. She held herself to an impossibly high bar and expected everyone around her to meet it. Not through criticism or complaints. Through example. The veterans noticed. Players who had initially been skeptical started buying in. They saw the work ethic. They felt the competitive fire. They recognized something in Clark that they had in themselves. This wasn't some entitled young star demanding attention. This was a competitor who simply couldn't accept anything less than excellence. One moment crystallized this for everyone watching. During a scrimmage, a A younger player made a lazy pass that got deflected. Nothing catastrophic. The team recovered possession. Most players would have moved on without comment. Clark stopped practice. Not angrily. Not dramatically. She just paused everything and walked over to that player. "That pass can't happen in Germany," she said. "International teams live for those mistakes. They'll turn that into points every single time." Then she demonstrated the correct technique. The angle. The timing. The velocity needed to get the ball through traffic. "Again," she said. "The player made the pass correctly." "Perfect," Clark nodded. "That's the standard." Practice resumed. It was a small moment. 30 seconds maybe. But it revealed everything about how Clark approached the game. Details matter. Excellence isn't optional. Standards exist for a reason. The coaching staff loved what they were seeing. Lawson had hoped Clark would be this kind of leader, but hoping and seeing are different things. Now she had confirmation that Clark could command a room full of elite players. That's not a skill everyone has. You can be the most talented player in the world and still lack the ability to elevate others. Some superstars make their teammates worse because everything revolves around their individual brilliance. Clark was the opposite. Her intensity raised the floor for everyone. Her communication made teammates better. Her competitive fire spread through the roster like wildfire. Young players especially responded to her leadership. Paige Buchers was matching Clark's energy in every drill. The two of them pushed each other relentlessly, neither willing to give an inch. Their backcourt battles during scrimmages were the most intense moments of camp. Angel Reese brought her own fire, channeling the competitive edge that had defined her college career. But she also watched how Clark led, took notes, recognized that there were different ways to inspire teammates. The dynamic was fascinating. This wasn't a team built around one voice. It was a team where multiple leaders were emerging, each with their own style, their own strengths, their own ways of pushing the group forward. Clark happened to be at the center of it all. Her position as starting point guard made that inevitable. The point guard touches the ball on almost every possession. The point guard sets the tone. The point guard is the coach on the floor. And Clark embraced that responsibility completely. But here's what separated this from typical leadership. Clark wasn't just focused on winning the 2026 qualifiers. She was thinking bigger. In conversations with teammates, and overheard by reporters, she kept bringing up Los Angeles. The 2028 Olympics. The chance to win gold on home soil. "This is the beginning," she told one group. "What we build here is what we'll take to LA. The connections we make now are what's going to win us a gold medal." That long-term vision was unusual for someone so young. Most players in their second professional year are focused on surviving, getting through each season, establishing themselves in the league. Clark was already plotting championship runs 4 years away, and she was bringing everyone along with her. The veterans who had initially questioned her leadership? They were listening now, because Clark wasn't just talking about the future. She was building it. Every practice, every drill, every moment of intensity. But as camp wound toward its conclusion, something unexpected happened. Something that would test everything this team had built. Leadership isn't given. It's taken. And Caitlin Clark was taking it in ways that nobody expected. See, here's the thing about Team USA camps. They have a hierarchy. Unwritten rules about who speaks and who listens. Veterans who have paid their dues get the respect. Young players are supposed to stay quiet, work hard, and earn their place over time. That's how it's always worked. Clark didn't get that memo. From the first practice she was vocal. Communicating on defense. Directing traffic on offense. Calling out rotations and adjustments like she'd been doing this for years. Some veterans raised eyebrows at first. Who was this second-year player commanding the court like she owned it? Who gave her permission to lead a team full of accomplished professionals? Nobody did. She gave herself permission. And here's what made it work. Clark backed up every word with action. When she called for a specific cut, she delivered the pass perfectly. When she demanded defensive intensity, she was the first one diving for loose balls. When she pushed the pace in scrimmages, she was still sprinting in the fourth quarter while others were gassed. Her leadership wasn't about ego. It was about standards. She held herself to an impossibly high bar and expected everyone around her to meet it. Not through criticism or complaints. Through example. The veterans noticed. Players who had initially been skeptical started buying in. They saw the work ethic. They felt the competitive fire. They recognized something in Clark that they had in themselves. This wasn't some entitled young star demanding attention. This was a competitor who simply couldn't accept anything less than excellence. One moment crystallized this for everyone watching. During a scrimmage, a younger player made a lazy pass that got deflected. Nothing catastrophic. The team recovered possession. Most players would have moved on without comment. Clark stopped practice. Not angrily. Not dramatically. She just paused everything and walked over to that player. "That pass can't happen in Germany," she said. "International teams live for those mistakes. They'll turn that into points every single time." Then she demonstrated the correct technique. The angle. The timing. The velocity needed to get the ball through traffic. "Again," she said. The player made the pass correctly. "Perfect," Clark nodded. "That's the standard." Practice resumed. It was a small moment. 30 seconds maybe. But it revealed everything about how Clark approached the game. Details matter. Excellence isn't optional. Standards exist for a reason. The coaching staff loved what they were seeing. Lawson had hoped Clark would be this kind of leader, but hoping and seeing are different things. Now she had confirmation that Clark could command a room full of elite players. That's not a skill everyone has. You can be the most talented player in the world and still lack the ability to elevate others. Some superstars make their teammates worse because everything revolves around their individual brilliance. Clark was the opposite. Her intensity raised the floor for everyone. Her communication made teammates better. Her competitive fire spread through the roster like wildfire. Young players especially responded to her leadership. Paige Buchers was matching Clark's energy in every drill. The two of them pushed each other relentlessly, neither willing to give an inch. Their backcourt battles during scrimmages were the most intense moments of camp. Angel Reese brought her own fire, channeling the competitive edge that had defined her college career. But she also watched how Clark led, took notes, recognized that there were different ways to inspire teammates. The dynamic was fascinating. This wasn't a team built around one voice. It was a team where multiple leaders were emerging, each with their own style, their own strengths, their own ways of pushing the group forward. Clark happened to be at the center of it all. Her position as starting point guard made that inevitable. The point guard touches the ball on almost every possession. The point guard sets the tone. The point guard is the coach on the floor. And Clark embraced that responsibility completely. But here's what separated this from typical leadership. Clark wasn't just focused on winning the 2026 qualifiers. She was thinking bigger. In conversations with teammates, and overheard by reporters, she kept bringing up Los Angeles. The 2028 Olympics. The chance to win gold on home soil. "This is the beginning," she told one group. "What we build here is what we'll take to LA. The connections we make now are what's going to win us a gold medal." That long-term vision was unusual for someone so young. Most players in their second professional year are focused on surviving, getting through each season, establishing themselves in the league. Clark was already plotting championship runs 4 years away, and she was bringing everyone along with her. The veterans who had initially questioned her leadership? They were listening now. Because Clark wasn't just talking about the future. She was building it. Every practice, every drill, every moment of intensity. But as camp wound toward its conclusion, something unexpected happened. Something that would test everything this team had built. Leadership isn't given. It's taken. And Caitlin Clark was taking it in ways that nobody expected. See, here's the thing about Team USA camps. They have a hierarchy. Unwritten rules about who speaks and who listens. Veterans who have paid their dues get the respect. Young players are supposed to stay quiet, work hard, and earn their place over time. That's how it's always worked. Clark didn't get that memo. From the first practice she was vocal. Communicating on defense. Directing traffic on offense. Calling out rotations and adjustments like she'd been doing this for years. Some veterans raised eyebrows at first. Who was this second-year player commanding the court like she owned it? Who gave her permission to lead a team full of accomplished professionals? Nobody did. She gave herself permission. And here's what made it work. Clark backed up every word with action. When she called for a specific cut, she delivered the pass perfectly. When she demanded defensive intensity, she was the first one diving for loose balls. When she pushed the pace in scrimmages, she was still sprinting in the fourth quarter while others were gassed. Her leadership wasn't about ego. It was about standards. She held herself to an impossibly high bar and expected everyone around her to meet it. Not through criticism or complaints. Through example. The veterans noticed. Players who had initially been skeptical started buying in. They saw the work ethic. They felt the competitive fire. They recognized something in Clark that they had in themselves. This wasn't some entitled young star demanding attention. This was a competitor who simply couldn't accept anything less than excellence. One moment crystallized this for everyone watching. During a scrimmage, a younger player made a lazy pass that got deflected. Nothing catastrophic. The team recovered possession. Most players would have moved on without comment.